Good morning. Thank you for coming out. We're great to be back here in Jacksonville, and I'm happy to be joined by the Commissioner of FDLE, Mark Glass. Your Congressman, Aaron Bean, is with us. We also have one of our great senators, Blaise Ngolia, here, and then we have one of our new representatives, Cayenne Michael. And then we have Stacy Kazuba from Sarasota, and you're going to hear a little bit from her later. This country is unable to control its own borders. We've seen millions of people come across illegally over the last 2+ years. We've seen China, our #1 adversary, fly a spy balloon clear over the continental United States with impunity and basically humiliate our country in the process. And so when you have policies that are that reckless, that impacts every state in this country. I don't need to tell people about the amount of drugs that have poured in to our country, particularly over the last several years. Yes, made in China, but brought across by the Mexican drug cartels. We had over 100,000 Americans die from drug overdoses last year. The vast majority of them are from opioids, including fentanyl. And this is not just limited, of course, to towns on the U.S.-Mexico border. This is happening all across the United States and communities in every corner of the United States. Now, in Florida, we have fought back, probably more than any state has fought back. And it's not just having 50 illegal aliens go to Martha's Vineyard. Now, that got a lot of news. They don't care about the other towns being overrun, but if you pierce their little cocoon in Martha's Vineyard, then it was like all hell broke loose. They got really upset about that, but that shined a light on this issue probably more than any single action has done. Of course, that was not even close to all that we have done. We had people in 2021 at the request of the Texas governor. I was the first state, Florida was the first state to answer the call for increased border security. We've also done things more recently as we started to see boats coming from Haiti and from Cuba, and the Coast Guard dumped like a couple hundred a couple months ago in the Florida Keys. So I declared a state of emergency, and the Coast Guard actually is good to work with, but Biden will not send additional support. So they're stretched very thin. So we declared a state of emergency, and we've surged our resources to help the Coast Guard. So you actually have Florida Fish and Wildlife, FDLE, our agencies out there stopping these boats from Haiti, and then we bring them to the Coast Guard. Coast Guard takes them and brings them back to Haiti. I mean, so that is something that when we did the state of emergency, you've seen a huge drop now in the number of vessels and in the number of people that have been able to make landing in the Florida Keys. And then the ones that did come, the Biden administration actually sent them to either California or Texas, so they weren't even released in our state. And look, we would have arranged transport out of our state if they were released here, but that's that. So this we're having a great effect, and basically I'm going to keep those operations going as long as they need to go. You can't just have hundreds of people dumped down in southern Florida and think that that's a sustainable thing. So we've made a big difference, and we're going to continue to make a big difference. But you've seen, even with us doing a lot of the stuff we've done, in addition to sending to down to Texas, in addition to the maritime interdictions, in addition to the illegal alien transport, we have done legislation and signed legislation cracking down on all government contractors who use illegal alien labor. We've also signed legislation prohibiting government contracts with any private entity that is facilitating Biden's policies. And you do have some of these, quote, nonprofit groups that are facilitating people coming through Mexico across our border. If you're engaged in that, you are violating the law, and you're not going to do business with the state of Florida. We've also signed legislation in Florida, just like most states, you got to be eligible, you got to be here legally to be able to work, but enforcing that can be difficult. And so, we have employment verification that we beefed up, not enough, and I'm going to address that in a minute, but we've been able to hold some of these businesses accountable who are knowingly employing illegal immigrant labor. We also signed legislation cracking down on opioid dealers and traffickers, including increasing the mandatory minimum sentence. When you're dealing in fentanyl, you're killing people. I mean, you talk about just a little bit, and this is done. And so people will lose a son or daughter who may have gone out and may have made a bad decision, but like not even knowing that this fentanyl is in like a drug they take or something, and then they die. And so you're knowingly doing that, knowing what the results are. So we're going to treat you like the murderer that you are. And I also petitioned the Florida Supreme Court in 2021 to impanel a statewide grand jury. And so these are things that we're able to do from time to time under Florida's Constitution. When I first became governor, we did one on the school security in the aftermath of the Parkland massacre, and that ended up leading to the resignation of the superintendent, replacing 4 school board members, a lot of recommendations to be able to make things better. And then more recently, in December of last year, we petitioned and the Supreme Court granted the ability to impanel a statewide grand jury looking at misrepresentations regarding mRNA vaccine. Because, they said that if you take it, you won't get COVID. They wanted mandates. They wanted all this. That turned out not to be true. And there's been a whole host of things that have come out. So that is ongoing right now. And we also did, though, 2021, we impaneled on illegal immigration. So we have a statewide grand jury impaneled now on illegal immigration. They can issue recommendations and issue reports, and they have issued some recommendations, and so we're going to be implementing some of those recommendations here today. But we need to do everything in our power to protect the people of Florida from what's going on at the border and the border crisis. And so we're announcing a number of, I think, really timely initiatives that we're going to be working with the legislature on to get this done in the upcoming legislative session. First, we're going to increase the penalties, and this is something that the grand jury recommended, increase the penalties for human smuggling. And so if you have people that are bringing into the state of Florida, people that are here illegally, it's going to be a 3rd-degree felony if you're doing that, and a 2nd-degree felony if there are aggravating circumstances. We also say that it's a separate offense for each individual transported, concealed, or harbored. And then when people are being transported, even though they may not have violated this, they're going to be detained as material witnesses. If you hold people accountable, they're not going to want to do this. But we need to update our laws to be able to get this done. We are also going to, so right now in Florida, you have to be legal to work, but businesses can either use E-Verify or they have the option of maintaining documents like I-9 or whatever. Well, that would require an audit to uncover some of the stuff. And so although we've been able to hold some accountable, it hasn't been effective enough. And so we're working with Blaise Angolia and the legislature to require all employers in Florida to use E-Verify to determine employment eligibility. And this will expand from our current requirements, which are just with public employees and with contractors with the state of Florida. But if you have the ability to have different types of enticements, you're going to end up having more people that are going to want to come illegally. If you remove the enticement of employment, then they're not going to want to come illegally to the state of Florida. So that's a huge, huge issue. Now, Florida correctly prohibits driver's licenses for illegal aliens, and we will continue to prohibit that. However, what local governments are doing is they're trying to circumvent that. They're trying to use nonprofits, use their funds, give money to nonprofits, and have nonprofit groups create ID cards for people here illegally. And that's just a way to try to evade the current state law. So our proposed legislation will prohibit that practice. Local governments will not be able to provide funds to issue ID cards to illegal aliens, and the legislation will invalidate all out-of-state licenses that have been given to illegal aliens. Florida's Constitution correctly requires you to be an American citizen if you want to vote in our elections, and that should be just an obvious thing. You see other places, San Francisco, New York City, now Washington, D.C., once illegal, or actually foreigners to vote, illegal aliens, or even like diplomats. Like, are you going to have some diplomat from the CCP voting in D.C. elections? I mean, it's insane what they're trying to do. So we don't allow that, and we've actually, with our election crime unit that I instituted with the legislators' help last year, you've actually seen illegal aliens prosecuted in Florida now for voting illegally, because some of them say, no one asked me. They just said I could vote, so I signed up and did it. So our bill will require, when you register to vote, that you affirm or swear under penalty of perjury that you are a United States citizen. And so if you check that box and you're not, then you're opening yourself up to prosecution. And we need to make sure that we want all citizens here that want to vote, but we don't want anybody here voting illegally. And if you're not a citizen of this country, you should not be voting in our elections. We're also going to require hospitals to collect data on how much it costs to provide health care to people in our state illegally. I mean, this is something that we estimate to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars range, but that's just the estimate based on very limited data. It may be much more, and that's one of the costs that we talk about people coming across the border illegally. Yes, some bring drugs, but most of them don't. Some are criminal aliens, but most of them are not. But even if you're not involved in any type of drugs, crime, going into communities you have millions now going across the country, that puts a stress on the education system, on public safety, and on health care. And I think you see that in every state, including the state of Florida. So we want those costs identified, and we want to be able to go to the people of Florida and let them know, and this is almost all uncompensated care that taxpayers are having to pick up, just what the costs of these border policies are. And then finally, one of the things that we're going to be doing is, I don't know why they did this in Florida before I became governor, but they're letting illegal aliens become licensed attorneys in Florida. It's like, how could you be violating the law and then be practicing the law? So we're going to end that practice to make sure that you're legal. And at the end of the day, what we're doing is, in the face of a failed federal administration, neglect at the border, honestly intentional of what's going on at the border because it fits their vision, we're fighting back on behalf of Floridians. And I think if other states mimic the proposals that have been put forth today in the proposed legislation that Blaise Ngolia has, it's going to make a big, big difference. And it's really going to, I think, force the federal government to get with the program and to finally secure and defend the borders of the United States of America. So we are going to be very happy to see this progress made here in the state of Florida, and it'll make a really big difference. We have enough people that want to come from these blue states. We can't also take everybody from other countries illegally. I mean, it's hard enough. The state's getting very, very crowded. So, all right, we're going to hear from some of the folks with us here today. So first, we have the Commissioner of FDLE, Mark Glass.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. I'm FDLE Commissioner Mark Glass, and I just want to tell you what a pleasure it is to work for Governor DeSantis. In my line of work, I will tell you, I get asked by my peers, and they ask me, what is it like to work in Florida? And I said, well, it's amazing, because we have a Florida governor who gets it, and he understands it, especially when it comes to law enforcement and public safety. And I want to thank him for inviting me to speak today on this topic that he was speaking of on this bill. It's of great importance to our public safety. And we know that our great state is a prime destination for Americans seeking the freedoms and opportunities that we routinely enjoy here. They're flocking here to experience the free state of Florida, and we get away from the impacts of overreach of government and also lawlessness emanating from weak leaders. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we do not have a weak leader. We have a strong and bold leader. But unfortunately, this is also a place that is a desired destination for illegal immigrants coming through our southern border. Illegal immigration and the criminal enterprises that surround it present a very real cost to our citizens in terms of increased crime and stretching our law enforcement resources. Earlier this month, FDLE, along with Florida Highway Patrol, concluded our 6th interdiction operation, working jointly with our local law enforcement and our federal partners. And our goal with these interdiction operations is to suppress criminal activity on our Florida highways and enforce violation of the Florida state statutes, including human smuggling, human trafficking, illegal drugs, and firearms. And during this most recent day operation, we encountered 29 undocumented illegal aliens, freely traveling far from our southern borders. And we seized nearly a kilo of cocaine and marijuana with a collector street value of more than $17,000, and as well as 4 illegal firearms. Now, since June of 2022, our joint interdiction operations have resulted in the apprehension of dozens of criminals who now face charges of hundreds of human smuggling, drug, and other felony charges, as well as seizure of more than 20 firearms, half a dozen stolen vehicles, illegal drugs, and nearly $750,000 seized. Now, thanks for the cooperation between law enforcement agencies throughout our state and the unprecedented support from Governor DeSantis, we are getting these violent criminals off our street. Now, those who choose to violate our laws, you will be pursued just like the lawbreakers I just spoke about. Human smuggling, drug trafficking, and a host of other criminal activities are appalling, and we should not have this in our state. But it's still spilling steadily across that southern border to get here. These federal failures are requiring Florida fixes, and this is the man to fix it. Governor DeSantis has been a champion for law enforcement. Everything from consistent raises and incentives, caring for our retired canines, and tackling the fentanyl crisis, and simply being a voice for good in the time that most people are trying to tear down this noble profession. This immigration bill that he spoke about today will help us in law enforcement cut criminal activity at its source. Now, I applaud the governor, his vision, his leadership to spearhead this initiative, and his courage to confront the issue of illegal immigration when so many others shrink from their responsibilities. With our continued vigilance, excuse my language here, my continued vigilance, can't use big words, it's usually rough on me. Just an old boy from Walton County, so. This bill will help keep Floridians safer, protecting our citizens from criminals who are illegally in our state and removing them from our communities altogether. Our mission is simple here, is to keep Florida residents and visitors safe, and to criminal actors who doubt our resolve, you better think again. Because if you come after our citizens with illegal intent or ill intent, and even our visitors that come here to visit this great state, We're coming for you. We're coming for you. Thank you, sir.
Blaze? Blaze?
Yes, sir. Good morning, everyone. Come on, good morning, everyone. Come on, we got the best governor in the United States here. So first of all, I just want to thank the governor's leadership on this issue. You will see a lot of people shying away from the big issues, but this governor is not afraid to tackle the issues that people have refused to tackle for decades. So, Governor, I thank you for your leadership. So, no notes, just going to speak from the heart here. The federal government is an absolute mess. It's an abomination, especially what's happening with the southern border. In fact, the southern border is so bad that I personally think the federal government should classify itself as its own disaster area. That's how bad it is. And we need bold leadership and policies like this to put forward. This comprehensive state-led illegal immigration initiative, anti-illegal immigration initiative, I think is so bold, and thank you, Governor, is so bold that it should be the blueprint for the other 50 states. Because the only way the federal government is going to react is when the states finally push back. And you have a leader here in Governor Ron DeSantis who is finally pushing back and putting the Biden administration on notice that Florida will not take it anymore. Personal opinion, I think Secretary Mayorkas should be impeached. And forgive me if I'm wrong, wasn't Kamala Harris supposed to be the border czar? Has anyone seen her? Did she show up to the border yet, Gov? Once, maybe? So, illegal immigration and what's happening at the southern border is not only a crime, it's a crime on humanity. All it is doing is enabling the drug cartels to allow things like fentanyl to come into our communities and kill our families, our friends, and our communities itself. And the federal government just refuses to fix this problem. If you remember, Ronald Reagan granted sort of like an amnesty, not sort of an amnesty, in the 80s. And the promise was if you grant that amnesty, in return, we are going to fix the illegal immigration system. And we're going to clamp down on illegal immigration, and we're going to fix the legal immigration system. But that never came because few in Congress actually have the spine to stand up and fix the problem. Now, we cannot fix the problem here from the states, but thank God we have a leader who is standing up and trying to fix the problem from the state level. So I will say this, we have a governor who leads. We have a governor who is putting forth this public policy and this vision to help our communities, to in fact help this country. The other 49 governors, you're now on the clock because this man is leading. Thank you, Governor, for what you do.
Hello, you all. How are you all doing? My name is Representative Kion Michael. I can say representative now because I am in the House representing some of you all sitting here. But more importantly, I'm an angel mom, and some of you all know my story. I love this legislation. I love this bill that the governor is putting forth because what happened to our family, and you're going to hear another story, should never happen. Not in America. Our families deserve to be safe in their own cities, in their own states, going to work, going about their everyday lives. Your children should not have to fear for their lives. And we have a governor who is bold enough to back everybody up and say, you know what, this is my state and my state, and I take responsibility. And I'm so grateful to be able to stand behind him. For those who do not know my story, our 21-year-old son, my husband, Bobby, a 20-year veteran, Navy veteran, is on the front row. And thank you to all of the veterans who are here. The governor, thank you all so much. We're a veteran town and state. Thank you for your service. Our 21-year-old son, Brandon Randolph Michael, was on his lunch break, just like an every average day young person, going to cash his paycheck because we raised our kids like how many of you all raise your children. If you want something, you go and work for it. Don't expect anything to be handed out to you. And Brandon was going to cash his check and twice deported, and that is correct, twice deported. That means he came here, the illegal came here through the southern border twice, and just would not stop until he ran into our son. And he caused Brandon's car to flip. And it wasn't far from here, actually, off of St. John's Bluff. If you're from Jacksonville, you know where that was. And that might have been 15 years ago, but to grieving parents, it's like yesterday. Some of you all are here, unfortunately, you can relate. It's a pain that never goes away. And Brandon, he lived for a little bit, but he was unfortunately killed. And I can tell you that my husband and I have we have not stopped, and we have been running nonstop to implement change and to stand for change, because no one should have to go through that. Brandon was born in Virginia when we were stationed in Virginia, and we came back to Jacksonville to raise our family because there's no place like home. And the worst day of our lives was being told that our child was never coming home again. And you know, when you're faced with something that is so detrimental, the worst thing that a parent can face, you have two options. You either stay there and you just wallow and you just somehow you're not able to get up. And I pray for the parents who endure that, because it's not an easy thing. Or you make up in your mind that I'm going to fight. And I made up in my mind that I am going to fight. And we have been fighting. And when you have a governor like Governor DeSantis, I mean, we could stand here all day and sing his praises, but I am living proof that this governor has stood by our family's side from the very beginning. He has stood boldly when other governors previous, I have to say it, just turned a deaf ear. But when you have a governor that is standing, we have to stand. And I'm so grateful for this legislation. E-Verify is needed because the person that killed our son was going to buy paint. So he was working somewhere under the table. But we didn't have the right as parents to know that. We didn't know what company he worked for. And that's not good enough. When you're a parent telling me I'm sorry, it's not good enough. It's not good enough for you all. It's not good enough for our state. It's not good enough for us as parents. And it's not good enough for our children. We have to make sure we are safe here in our own nation. And I thank you all so much, and I look forward to standing behind this legislation. I thank you, Governor, for having the boldness to stand up. You guys, he made New York backpedal on what they were doing. How about that? Because they recognize that it is dangerous to have your own citizens as weapons. And that's exactly what's happening, is that your own citizens, our own citizens were being weaponized. And I can tell you every 11 seconds, an American citizen becomes a victim of illegal crime. That unfortunately, it could be through death. It could be through car accidents. It could be through your identity. When your identity is stolen, it's very difficult to get that back. It could be through the drugs that are coming through. It's so many different ways. And I can tell you, people who come to this nation to become American citizens, they're very proud when they stand up and they go through the classes, because we do have a legal process. And unlike Kamala, I have been to the border. I've been to McAllen, Texas. I have been to El Paso, Texas. I've been to Laredo, Texas. I've seen firsthand what is happening at our border, and it's horrible. So I can tell you right now that this legislation and this bill, it will definitely keep us safe. And I thank you, Governor, for bringing it forward. I thank you all for listening to me. And God bless America, and God bless our great governor.
Okay, Stacy.
Good morning. My name is Stacy. I'm a Florida native. I was born and raised in Sarasota, so Florida is home to me. And the initiatives that were brought forth by Governor DeSantis this morning are very important to me and near to my heart. So I appreciate you allowing me to share my story here today. On June 5th, 2021, I was asleep in my bed and woken up with a knife to my throat and pressure on my chest. I typically sleep with the lights out and pitch black, so I couldn't see much, and I assumed that I was in a dream. I was in a nightmare. When I realized I wasn't, I started fighting. We ended up on the floor. He cut my face, my body, and my fingers were severed from grabbing the knife, trying to get it out of his hands. I threw it under the bed, but now he starts strangling me. From being woken up from a dead sleep and many minutes into this fight, I'm now losing blood and realize that I'm getting weak. His upper body strength is factually stronger than mine. I get out of his grip twice, but losing consciousness by the third attempt. Strangulation is a very slow process. You have time to think. And I think I will not allow this to be my fate, never knowing who or why, assuming someone is killing me just for fun. I haven't heard any words from him at this point, and I haven't seen his face. I won't let my family not know, so I switch gears. I start asking him the same 3 questions repeatedly in the voice that I still have. And eventually I ease up on fighting him, and he lets up, and he turns on the lights. It's a face I haven't seen before, but I put together that he was my neighbor. He turns on the lights to rape me. He sodomizes me. And at this point, I'm degraded, but I can tell you that in this moment, I knew I was going to get out because there was a motive other than just being there to kill me for no reason. He imprisoned me in my home. At some point, I begged for water to build my strength. I asked him to take me to the bathroom, and here he started freaking out. My blood was all over him. I'm wondering if he's realized how bad this was and if he's going to finish the job. We couldn't communicate well because of a language barrier. I ended up helping him clean himself of my blood to calm him down and gain his trust. Meanwhile, I'm bleeding badly. He proposes to me that night. He tells me he's going to take me to Mexico with him. I can give you key points of that night, but no one will understand how this happening to you in your home and your sanctuary changes you. This was a traditionally safe neighborhood, and that's why I moved there. If a stranger can do this to me, who can I trust at this point? There have been nights that I haven't slept until it got light outside because I knew the threshold for somebody breaking into my home was minimized at that point. I kept calm through the night and strategized. I escaped, running naked and bloody through my neighborhood until I could call 911 and get to the ER. So the reason I'm standing in front of you is because I wanted to know why and how could I have prevented this. So I asked questions. I asked questions to anybody who had answers. I found out that even though I never met my attacker, he watched me for a year. He and up to 7 other men who lived illegally in a home behind my own. He was housed by a company who employed him and known for hiring illegal immigrants, brokered by a leasing agent to this company, an owner who had no idea who lived in the home. He was paid under the table. Now I flash back and I think about how if I didn't make it out of there, if I was indeed strangled to death or kidnapped, I'd be an unsolved case. I know this for many reasons. 1, no matter how much DNA was left in my home, his DNA was not on file with the states. His fingerprints are not on file. He doesn't file a W-2. I don't even know his name is registered accurately anywhere. So though detectives would have likely canvassed my neighborhood, they would have no probable cause to obtain DNA from any of those 8 men because I never met them. There's no interaction they could puzzle together. They could not require that he gave a sample. It's just not how that works. My attacker received 8 initial charges. 3 of them carried life sentences. I was lucky enough to be part of the sentencing process. He received 25 years with no gain time and will be extradited back to Mexico upon his release after the 25 years. But I may not have been so lucky, and many people may not have either, for it to even get to that point and for him to be in custody. I don't care what your political affiliation is. Governor DeSantis and his team are protecting the safety of a state, not a party. Whether a Democrat, liberal, Republican, this could happen to anyone. It could happen to your family. So back to my original question of why. How could I prevent this? Well, I can't alone, and that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Stacy, for those very poignant remarks, and we're sorry that you had to go through that, but we don't want that to happen to anybody, and so that's why we're here to do something about it. And I think we're going to be able to do more in the next couple months when the legislature reconvenes than anyone's been able to do in the modern history of Florida, and that'll make our state stronger, and it'll make our state freer. So let's get it done.
One, your reaction to the Biden administration announcing basically a return to remain in Mexico. And second, on the E-Verify piece of this, you tried this in your first year in office. Obviously, there was a lot of pushback from the business and the agriculture community. How do you sell this to the hospitality and farmers?
So, great question. So, Biden, we are hearing that they are going to do even more in response to some of the stuff we've done by reinstituting some of the policies that had been in place that he repealed, like Remain in Mexico. I think they need to do that. After we did the Martha's Vineyard, they actually did limited Remain in Mexico in response to that for Venezuelans and maybe for some others. We also have the case that we brought in federal court against the Biden administration challenging their catch and release policies. Because what they're doing with catch and release, they're basically nullifying existing law. They're granting just parole to everybody, but that's not the way it is written in the law. That case is submitted before the Federal District Court in the Northern District of Florida. We believe we're going to win that case, and so that's going to put additional pressure on them to try to get with the program. So it's sad that they've let in 5 million plus illegal aliens over just a 2-year period. I would like to see them take steps to stop that. At the end of the day, if you change the policies and you send the signal that we're not going to be honoring, because what's happening, people know if they just claim asylum, coming across the southern border, if you get in, fine. If they stop you, just claim asylum, and it triggers this ridiculous process when these are not people that are really eligible for asylum. They're economic migrants. They want to be able to come and just work because America's better than they came from. And I get that, and I probably would feel the same way if I were in their shoes. But that's not how you govern a country based on the rule of law, and it just doesn't work. So I hope that they get smart on this. I think if he's going to run again, this is a massive problem for him. And I think that they're wising up about that, because you can't defend the borders of your own country. That's kind of like your primary job. In terms of the political opposition, look, these are tough issues because you basically have a Democrat Party now that is for open borders. They don't believe in enforcing immigration law. So they oppose E-Verify because their view is you don't have a right to tell a foreign national that they can't come illegally. It's insane, their ideology, but that's kind of woke ideology run amok. And that's pretty much all of those folks. So then you have us Republicans, you have people like Blaze who are basically rule of law first, and then you have others that are more catering to some of the corporate. And I think what we ended up with a couple years ago was enhanced employment verification, but you did not have to use E-Verify. You were able to hold these documents. We were given limited authority to audit that at the state level. So although we were able to hold some accountable, it was not what you need. And I think people look at this and they say, you know what, we need to get this right. Here's the thing. people want to come to Florida. We were looking about all the stuff with housing and all this other stuff. You know, wouldn't it be better for us if, because I can't prevent people from coming. If you want to move from New York or Michigan or whatever, that's your right. Now, most of them are moving, I think, for the right reasons, it turns out, and they want to be part of what we're doing here, which is great, and they're not trying to vote a different way. But nevertheless, you can come regardless of that. And so if we have that, wouldn't it be better to say that the migration coming into Florida are American citizens, or at least people who are here lawfully? And that's what we want to get to. Yes, anyone else?
Two-part question. Was this something that was discussed or at least planned to talk about in the last legislative session? And were there any factors of this that carries over into the next legislative session when you start bringing this latest proposal there?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, look, we fought the fight, as was mentioned. You know, we ended up with a compromise version that was inadequate. We had a lot on the agenda in the last legislative session. As you guys know, we got done more than probably we've ever done. But I also didn't see the great prospects of success on some of these issues with that legislative configuration. Well, now we have super majorities in the legislature. We have, I think, a strong mandate to be able to implement the policies that we ran on, and these are policies that I've been for since the day I became governor over 4 years ago. So I think it's just a different political context now in terms of having supermajorities that really makes a difference. And I think that a lot of this stuff should be a no-brainer. We understand some of it may be a fight, but you know what? Stand up and express what you believe. If you don't believe this is the right policy, then just be honest about it and say what you believe. I think the problem that voters have, and I just, because I'm a voter too, with some of these Republicans, and you see it a lot in Washington too, they campaign saying they're going to do all these things, but then when they get up there, they don't want to do it. And that's the problem.
Thank you. And the second question is something that has happened recently with your administration changing or at least requiring people with any events that happen at the Capitol to coincide or at least align with the state agency mission. What does that mean, and what are like the penalties if someone doesn't abide by that?
I saw a little report. That actually was not something that I was involved with. It didn't necessarily come down from me. I think I would imagine that it's just, you go there and you speak your mind, great, but you'll have some groups that will try to take over capitals, like we've seen in other state capitals. And it's interesting. If they're doing that from the left, then the media says that's democracy in action. They don't say it's an insurrection if you take over, a capital because of that. But I think that's what it's getting to. And so, we've been very supportive of people being able to speak their mind. It's their right. They should be able to do it. But we've also said, you don't have a right to hijack and do like a heckler's veto and to stop the functioning of government. And so I think that's probably what it is, but our folks can follow up with you about more of it who were more involved. Okay, yes, ma'am?
Specifically about the policies, excuse me, I'm a lot shorter than Aaron there. Specifically about the policy regarding prohibiting out-of-state tuition waivers for undocumented immigrants. Florida estimates about 40,000 undocumented immigrants in our colleges and universities. Can you tell me why this change of policy is important to your administration and how you think this might impact those educational opportunities?
Well, as you know, we work really hard to make higher education affordable for Floridians, and we're proud of that. We have the most affordable higher education in the country. You can go to university here as an in-state. It's like $6,000, $6,200 on average. Very tough to beat. However, there's a movement. They want to raise tuition. I won't let them raise tuition, but they want to do it. We have had inflation. So the costs have changed. So if we want to hold the line on tuition, then you got to say you need to be a U.S. citizen who lives in Florida. Why would we subsidize non-U.S. citizen when we want to make sure we can keep it affordable for our own people?
Slightly off-topic question, but have you had a chance they be discriminatory on the basis of race or gender? I'm just trying to
I have
understand how that
not
would
seen
work.
it. I think you saw we did the panel to try to talk about some of the stuff. And, at the end of the day, you have a situation where because of some of the background case law that developed 60 years ago, you have a situation where you've got a lot of drive-by media. So they will basically smear somebody, put it out there, and then you will debunk it like the next day or whatever, but it's kind of already gotten out there, and there's no recourse effectively if you lie about somebody. And the government should not be involved in this regulating, because you can't regulate speech, but private parties being able to go and say, wait a minute, this was a false statement, you were reckless, or I mean even negligent should be. That's just, we don't have enough of that where there's any accountability. So that's the issue we raise, and it's not much about me, because I do have a platform. I mean, remember, I think 60 Minutes did a hit piece on me, and it was false, and so I was able to go out and fight back doing press conferences and stuff. And you know what? People looked, and they believed I was right. I even had Democrats coming out saying 60 Minutes was off their rocker. But you have other people who do not have the platform that I have, who get targeted. Usually the people get targeted are people that are right of center by some of the entrenched media entities, and they can kind of do it, and these folks don't necessarily have adequate recourse. It's a difficult thing to do that will stick in the courts, but I do think the courts have recognized in the 60s when they did this, it was a much different time. The media ecosystem was way, way different than it is now, and so it was not grounded in the text, history, or structure of the Constitution. Now you look at it and say, okay, it wasn't mandated really. It was a policy choice that the courts made, which they really don't have the authority to do that. But how does that policy hold up now in this fragmented media ecosystem? And so I know they're working on doing things. I have not done or submitted anything personally, and I haven't reviewed anything personally. But these are things just going. For example, and we're going to do an event to really highlight a lot of this. And you've asked about it in the past, and I think have identified that's the flaw in some of this. But they've tried to create in Florida a narrative. It's basically a book ban hoax. It's a hoax what they're doing. And they're trying to say that because we have parental rights and because we have curriculum transparency, if you have a book that has hardcore pornography in a library that 10-year-olds can access, a parent objects to that, that does not satisfy Florida standards. It should not be in the library with those young kids. And I think 99% of parents agree with that. What you will see, and you had a person in Jacksonville say, take a picture of blank bookshelf, say, the state doesn't want any books in the library, and then it ends up going. And then you have lefty media that do it, and then they try to create a narrative. They've also said, you just had on MSNBC, you had the reporter saying that Governor DeSantis does not want students to learn about slavery and its aftermath. Well, if you actually looked at what our standards are, not only is it not prohibited to teach that, it's required to teach that. It's required to teach all of those things. It's required under Florida statutes to teach about racial discrimination. And so they will say, the school had to take a book about Hank Aaron off the shelf because it talks about he faced racial discrimination. And you're thinking like, okay, and why are they doing that? They're doing that to try to create a narrative. They're not doing that because Florida has a law or anything like that. They know that's not in the law, but they're doing it because they know there's enough people in corporate media who will just take that and will run with that. So we've got all these examples cataloged of basically media lies to try to do the hoax. A lot of this has been debunked. The Jacksonville person got fired. There's a teacher in Central Florida that was doing really inappropriate things in terms of what they were putting out online. So that's gone. And so at the end of the day in Florida, if it's explicit and pornographic, parents have the right to object, and it should be taken off. And then in terms of issues involving American history, it's very clear in Florida standards that we are required to teach all aspects of Black history, not queer theory, but actual aspects of Black history. including MSNBC, slavery and its aftermath, and including and required also to teach about the discrimination. So that is in the law. And so when they're trying to say they have to take a Roberto Clemente book or something like that, they are lying to you. And it's one thing for a stooge who's a partisan apparatchik that may be in like a teacher union to try to do this, but to have corporate media not immediately shoot that down, because all you have to do is look up our standards. Very easy to do. And so it's really just a reckless disregard for what the truth actually is. And the good news about it is, I think because of the lack of guardrails on some of this stuff in terms of being able to do private suits, the standard has gotten lower and lower. The preparation has gotten worse, fact-checking has gotten worse, all that stuff. But what it's done is it's created a situation where the vast majority of the people know that this is an agenda that's trying to be imposed on them. They know these are narratives, and so they don't typically believe it anymore. And I think that a lot of those outlets only have themselves to blame. All right, everybody, thank you. God bless.